All right, man. Welcome back to another episode of Just Me Talking. If you're unfamiliar, this is literally just the series where I'm talking, and you can kind of just run this in the background like a podcast. I won't really be showing anything on screen that's like notable, so like it's probably just gonna be album covers on screen. So you really have like nothing to watch here. Now I have two little notes. For one, there might be some background noise. There's some stuff going on by me. So yeah, if that's there, sorry. I'm gonna try and kind of blur it out with like music in the back, obviously. Two, I recorded this whole video with the mic off and it was like 20 plus minutes. So this might be a little watered down. I actually included some stuff that I forgot about, which is cool. But other than that, I might sound like I'm kind of just throwing some things to the side or just kind of rushing through certain sections. That's because I literally already recorded it. So sorry, I've just got to do it again is all. All right, so if you read the title, you know that today I'm going to be talking about underrated albums. And let's just go, man. And let's talk about Metallica. I feel like when you say underrated and Metallica, a lot of people jump to say like Lulu, Kill 'Em All, maybe And Justice for All, or you're friggin' insane and say Saint Anger. But personally, I think the most underrated Metallica album is easily Load. I don't think I see an album as consistently placed as like just a straight mid project as much as Load. Like I understand the criticism with Reload because those were literally just B-sides to Load, but Load itself is actually really freaking good and actually insanely consistent. Love the more blues rock, kind of hard rock direction they went with this album, and I genuinely think this is one of their best records to date. And I'd go as far as to say this would be an amazing listen if it was like 40 or 50 minutes, because as is, it's a little bloated, I will admit. But even then, it's still a really strong record from Metallica. And I honestly think this is one of their best records. I have yet to put up the Metallica video, but you'll see how high it ranks when I do it. Yeah, this record freaking slaps, and I think it's insanely underrated and insanely overlooked in the Metallica catalog. Like I said, though, everyone kind of jumps to say Lulu is really underrated, and while yes, I agree, I feel like that album has its own cult-like fan base, where I feel like there's like no one trying to defend Load is all. Now on Load, Metallica kind of tested out new sounds, and speaking of testing, let's talk about A$AP Rocky's album Testing. That was an awful segue, but I'm going to keep it in. This record goes friggin' hard, and I'm honestly tired of seeing people say it's a mess. It's such a messy record. It's so all over the place. No, dude, this is literally his second best project to me. It's super consistent. Just dealing at, like, I love the cloud rap aesthetic of this record. You got some really friggin' vibey tracks on here, like Tony Tone, A$AP Forever. It just, oh. And then you got the more acoustic tracks on here, like Cal Drops and Purity, and friggin' Kids Turned Out Fine. But this album isn't short of bangers. You have Buckshots with Cardi, I think. And then you also have Praise the Lord, which is a friggin' classic. There's too many hitters on this record to call it like bad. There's too many hitters on this record to call it mid. It's actually a pretty good album. And like I said, is my second favorite A$AP project. I'm low-key tired of seeing this in like an album like Cherry Bomb getting slandered because, oh, they're too messy. Oh, the blah, 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 this or that. Whatever, man. These are friggin' great records. And I think that this album really holds up. And I think it's really underrated too. It is kind of getting a resurgence in terms of praise. I see some people saying like, oh, this is actually a pretty solid listen. I'm hoping people will start saying like, this is actually a pretty freaking great album, because it is. Yeah, I really like this project. I'm excited to see where he goes after this. But he retired, so, we won't see. So that sucks. Speaking of Rocky, though, this next project actually has a Rocky feature on it. That project being Playboi Carti's self-titled mixtape. This friggin' record slaps. I genuinely cannot explain the sheer amount of joy I get when I listen to this record. The record is so cozy. It's so catchy. It's so vibey, man. The production on here is super just like, ooh, it's just super smooth. Carti's flows are great. His ad-libs, oh my god, I love it. Like ad-libbing along with this record, just kind of going, what? It's super vibey. You just gotta let the vibe consume you, man. You just let it envelop you and just swallow you whole. When you let that happen, you get songs on here like Flex that just swallow you whole and just make you fly into the sky. There's so many freaking bangers on here. You got Woke Up Like This, New Choppa, of course. But then you also got some more laid back cuts like Yamin and Number 9. There's so many great tracks on here. And you, of course, have Location, Magnolia. It's just so good, man. This record freaking slaps. And I'm tired of people saying this is like Carti's worst album. It's literally his best album. I'm not even gonna joke. This is unironically a 10. Yeah, I love this record, man. It's easily Carti's best to me. And it just gets better with every listen. Yeah, really cozy album. Really like this one. Sadly, though, I do not have a segue into this next album, that being Lupe Fiasco's Lasers. I will fully admit that this is not a good album. Like, genuinely, it is not a good album. There's some really awful pop rap songs on here that are just not good to listen to, but there are also some pretty good songs. Like, I think a lot of people like the Show Goes On song. That's a pretty good song, actually. And there are some other highlights too, but for the most part, it's a pretty mixed bag and super all over the place. That being said, though, this is nowhere near Lupe's worst. I haven't covered him in a video yet, but there are like 2 records that I honestly think are way worse than this album. I just thought I'd throw this in here just to kind of say, I feel like this album isn't as much underrated as it is overhated. I see so many people throwing this in as Lupe's worst, when, like I said, I feel like he has worse records. So I'm just going to kind of defend this one a little, kind of throw it out there. This record isn't good, it isn't bad, it's just kind of okay. Yeah, Lupe has worse. I don't really have much more to say. This record isn't nearly as bad as everyone makes it out to be. Then, like I said, I don't really have a segue into this next one either. Let's talk Young Thug and his latest 2 albums, Punk and Business is Business. Now, these projects nearly aren't as good as like something out of the Slime Season trilogy. They aren't as good as a Jeffrey or a Beautiful Thugger Girls, but they're still both good albums. I get the criticism of Punk. It is a little messy, I will admit, and it was a little weird. But Business is Business is actually a pretty freaking great album. So many people are labeling it as boring. I don't see it genuinely. I think that it's actually a pretty good album. And while it is a little inconsistent, I genuinely don't see the criticism of this being like, oh, it's so boring. It's not like there's nothing happening here. Both albums are underrated and are honestly, as I said, good albums. Yeah. Editor me breaking in to just put this album in here. I literally recorded this video and then later listened to this album again. And I realized, oh wow, this is actually a really solid album and I really like it. So I thought I'd just throw it in here. That record being Tonight by David Bowie. I do not understand why this album is so hated. It is actually super friggin' great. The production is actually pretty good despite it sounding a little dated. Bowie's voice is great as always. It's just like, I guess someone could say it's boring, but I don't see it, man. It's actually a friggin' pretty great album that I honestly found to be just consistently really enjoyable. I thought the second track was really groovy. I love the intro. It's a little long, but it's actually still really good. And while it does drag a little near the end, I don't really see like the big problem with this one. It's pretty good to me, man. Overall, though, I thought this was actually a pretty freaking great Bowie album. And I'm glad I started, going back into his discography. Because after Let's Dance, I was a little bored. I was like, I don't really know what's going to come next after this. Don't really have any interest. But I just decided to throw on Tonight, and I actually really, really enjoyed it. And to be honest with you, I like it more than Let's Dance. And I also thought it was better than Station to Station and whatnot. This record is actually pretty good and is very underrated as well. And I'll throw this one in too, just a little quick side note. Diamond Dogs by Bowie is also really underrated. I honestly placed that up there with like Hunky Dory and Ziggy and whatnot. I think that's one of his best records. Just thought I'd throw that little bit in. Yeah. I feel like I had a kind of running theme with the first few. But now I'm literally just firing off random albums, and proof of that is the next one, Humans by Gorillaz. This record put me onto so many artists I like now. Vince Staples, De La Soul, Danny Brown, friggin' Pusha T, friggin' Kali Uchis. It just doesn't stop, man. There's so many great features on this record. The feature list is crazy. Put me onto so many good artists. A lot of the features just steal the show. Pevin Everett on friggin' Strobe Light. I think that's how you say his name. That he just does fantastic on that song. That's literally the best track off here. Now, a lot of people argue, like the features, they just carry the record. It's not even a Gorillaz album, It's just all features, And while I get the criticism, I still really love this record. Okay, and I have nostalgia for this record, and that's gonna make people say, "Oh, you're just nostalgia bias," And I would say, "Oh, maybe," but then I listened to the Now, and I used to love that record when I was younger, but I actually really didn't like it this time around, and I thought it was insanely boring. But going back to this record, I actually really liked it still. So there is nostalgia here, but I actually still really like it. And while yes, there are some misses on here, I will admit, SMP and Busted in Blue are not great. And a lot of people like to complain about Hallelujah Money and We Got the Power. But like genuinely, I look at those songs and I say, yes, they are not good songs, but I like them because they are campy. Like We Got the Power is the perfect example of a campy song. It's super freaking corny, but also kind of good. And Hallelujah Money is the same. It's super freaking weird. It's super messy. But like, dude, hear me out. It kind of goes hard. I still love this record, and I think it's definitely one of Gorillaz' best records. And I'm going to close out this segment by saying it's better than Demon Days. Okay, let's move on. Now, this next segment is just going to be me kind of rapid-firing some stuff off, whether it be an artist or some albums or just like a album that I don't really have a lot of notes on. So yeah, let's just get into it. Let's kick this off with the Lil Figurative album from last year, History Repeats Itself. This record is still underrated. If you have not heard it, please give it a listen. It's super freaking great. If you like Billy Woods, MF Doom, or Griselda, definitely give this a listen. Fig is still underrated and really outdid themselves on this record. Now let's talk Ween. I really love Ween, and I think that a lot of their older stuff, like The Crucial Squeegee Lip or Ween 2 Axe as Bold as Boognish, is actually pretty solid. I get the hate for Erica Peterson's Flaming Crib Death because that album's a freaking straight mess. But the other two records are actually pretty good noise rock albums, and I think that they're pretty underrated too. Doja Cat is still an underrated artist to me. I think Hot Pink and Scarlet are actually really solid records, and while I'm not the biggest fan of Planet Her, I think that she's actually pretty good, and find her to be pretty underrated and always lumped in with everyone else as like, oh, it's just lame pop rap, it's so boring. No, these records are actually pretty good, and I think that she's also pretty good. Radiohead's latest record from 2016, A Moon-Shaped Pool, still manages to be my favorite record by them. A lot of people say it's boring, but I genuinely don't see the criticism here. It's actually a really beautiful, really emotional record that I really enjoy. Just the production on here, the vocals, it's a super subdued and very serene listen. Definitely one of the best albums to listen to at night. This record is fantastic and definitely my favorite Radiohead album. And Cities of Eve, he's just underrated, man. Genuinely, if you like cloud rap, listen to Cities of Eve. If you like more plunderphonic sounding stuff, listen to later Cities of Eve. He's so underrated, man, and just is never getting his flowers. Yeah, he's really underrated, man. And then we'll close this section out with one EP, that being by the great Andre 3000. The EP in question is called Look Ma No Hands. I want to do a video on this, actually. I just kind of wanted to throw it here as a little side note, because this EP is absolutely fantastic. It's a mix of avant-garde jazz as well as some really strange weirdo soul music. Andre sings on one song and it's heartbreaking. This EP is really emotional and honestly a tough listen. If you have not heard it though and you consider yourself a fan of Andre 3000, definitely give this a listen. It's super freaking just heartbreaking and really, really good. As I said, I want to do a video on this. Alright, man. Now let's talk about the most underrated album of all time. Now, you are not going to guess what this is. You just won't, okay? You won't. And you might think you know what I'm about to say. You might say, oh, he's going to say Peggy album. Or blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that. I don't care, dude. You are not going to get this record. You just won't get it. And, like, if maybe you scrolled a little, if you scrolled through the albums, because I showed them on the screen, and you might be like, oh, wait, what's this? And you might already know because you looked ahead. But if you didn't, you will not know what this is. You're not going to know what hit you here. Okay? You try and guess. I'll give you 3 seconds. Okay, I'll give you a hint, and then I'll give you 3 more seconds. It's a greatest hits album. You ready? I'll let you wait, okay? This album is called Greatest, and it is by Duran Duran. Okay? Hear me out, man. This record freaking slaps. Now, I have nostalgia for this album, too. I used to listen to this album when I was younger, and jeez, man, this record holds up. I listened to this a month ago, and it freaking held up, man. The songs on here go so hard. If you want some really nice synth pop, some really nice new wave, with that old 80s kind of sound, listen to this record, man. Is There Something I Should Know? Banger. Reflex. Banger. A View to a Kill. Banger. Ordinary World. Beautiful. Save a Prayer. Ooh, serene. Rio, Hungry Like the Wolf, Girls on Film. You know those songs. Those are hits. Fantastic tracks. I'm not the biggest fan of Planet Earth, though. I think that Planet Earth is kind of mid. But then Union of the Snake, oof, that song slaps. New Moon on Monday, that's a weaker song, too, but it's a skip. But everything else after that is actually pretty good. Wild Boys is a campy song that I like, is honestly really corny, but I also really enjoy. Then you got Notorious, that song freaking slaps. I Don't Want Your Love goes hard. All She Wants Is, that's another skip for me. That song's mid. It's trying too hard to be sensual. Then Electric Barbarella, that song freaking slaps. Serious is so good. And then Skin Trade is like a top 10 song of all time. I Do Not Care. And then you close out with Come Undone, which just freaking, oh my god, it's so good, bro. This record has misses, but still goes insanely hard. This is a fantastic album, and I have an unconditional love for it. If you have not heard this, please do. It is so good and so underrated. I understand that it is super niche, but genuinely, listen to this album. It is so good. Just listen to it. I have nothing else to say. Just listen to it. And those are some underrated albums to me. I try to knock out as many as I could because I don't really think I'm going to do a part 2 of this unless, like, I don't know, I listen to a bunch of other albums. Now, I thought about doing one on overrated albums, too, to kind of make it like a twinner. But I honestly thought that if I did one on overrated, it would kind of be boring. I feel like you guys know what albums I think are overrated. Of course, Days Before Rodeo. You'll see in the Metallica video what I think are overrated. Just kind of gonna leave it there. The Wall by Pink Floyd is super overrated. Flower Boy by Tyler is overrated. It's good though. You got DS2, not the biggest fan of that album. Lift Your Skinny Fists, I've claimed, is like the most overrated album ever. It's still pretty good though. And like Abbey Road, of course. I feel like it would be more generic, pretty boring for me to just like talk about overrated albums the whole video. As I said, you guys already know what I think is overrated. You already know why. So yeah, I probably won't do one on overrated albums. But there's the video. If you think I left out any albums, if you think there are underrated albums that people should be talking about, leave them in the comments as always. You know, you think there are any overrated albums? I had fun doing this. I always like to do one of these videos when I'm getting kind of bored with editing tier lists all the time. I'm aware that my content is insanely repetitive, but I try to throw some of these videos out every so often because I enjoy doing them, and I enjoyed doing this. Thank you for listening to me rant, and I hope to see you in the next one, man.